So it's great to have you here with us again. Thank you so much for joining us. I believe that you're going to be presenting on how you facilitate trust-wide instructional coaching. Also as well, I should say to anybody joining us, welcome. If you have any questions for Leyla at all, please pop them in the comments on whichever social media channel you're watching on. We're live streaming against a few of them, and we'll pose those questions to Leyla at the end. And I'm really looking forward to this, Leyla, because I miss your session at our conference. So I'll shut up now and pass over to you.
Fab. Thank you. Thanks, Hailey. That's brilliant. So, yes, to just introduce myself, as Hailey said, my name's Leyla Palmer. I am Head of Professional Learning and Talent at Windsor Academy Trust, and just very passionate about teacher professional development, really see the value in supporting teachers to be the best that they can be. And at our trust we very much live by the words of Dylan William in when he echoes about how every teacher needs to improve, not because they're not good enough, but because we can all be that even better. So that's very much the heart of what we do. And we know that the thing that has the biggest impact on students and their life chances is having a great teacher in front of them. So today I'm going to share with you some of the insights into our approach to instructional coaching, and where we really strive for that optimal balance between high alignment and high autonomy across our schools. So where we use a tight but loose framework, we try to make sure that we give that centralised support and training and resources that really support schools with their approach to instructional coaching, whilst at the same time allowing for individual schools to really contextualize their approach and make it as relevant as possible for their teachers and their students in their schools. So I'll also be sharing with you some examples of what this looks like in some of our schools. So to start off, just a brief introduction to instructional coaching, and I say brief, literally a minute or two, for those of you that don't know much about about instructional coaching at all. So our definition that we use in our trust is how instructional coaching is this approach to professional development in schools. It's a mechanism where we try and help teachers improve by giving them, and these key words here, regular, bite-sized action steps based on a short drop-in observation. So that's what we would summarize instructional coaching and the approach to instructional coaching as being. And how that relates to traditional professional development. So why is there a need for instructional coaching as opposed to the traditional methods of traditional teacher professional development? Well, in the words of Antonio and Kyriakides here from the University of Cyprus, around how traditional teacher professional development, and we've got this graphic here that represents that traditional method where you perhaps have a facilitator, someone leading a CPD session with a whole group of staff, and the words here really are driving home the point about, you know, most teacher professional development training opportunities remain fragmented, often poorly aligned with curricula, inadequate to meet teachers' needs and their individual priorities for improvement. So what instructional coaching aims to do is to really meet teachers where they're at, rather than address needs of a whole cohort of teachers all in one CPD session. And it's not to say that there's not a place for traditional professional development. For example, when you're getting a certain message across, or imparting knowledge on a particular topic, for example, that all teachers need to know about, then perhaps at times that is the most appropriate method. But what we want to do is really help teachers each individually develop their own classroom practice, and like I say, meeting teachers where they are at. We know that there's this huge, this strong evidence base behind instructional coaching for doing exactly that, for supporting teachers in the areas that they most need it. And Sam Sims here refers to instructional coaching as being one of those best bets. So we know that there are a number of things that we can do to improve teacher effectiveness, and most will have some sort of impact, but we want to embrace those strategies and those approaches that are going to have the biggest impact. And that's why we've really embrace the whole instructional coaching approach at Windsor Academy Trust. So I said I was going to talk to you about striving for that optimal balance between how we get a high alignment and a high autonomy across our schools. So what do we mean by this high alignment and high autonomy? Well, we know that alignment across all of our schools will ensure that we're all pushing towards that same goal and sharing that common purpose. So, but we also know that having autonomy for teachers is and across schools is a property of highly effective agile teams. So essentially, what we want to do is ensure that we're in this top right quartile here, where we've got this aligned autonomy, where we're not offering this autocratic process or system across our schools where we haven't got anarchy where everyone's just doing whatever they want to do, but we've got a real clear strategy and approach to what we do with instructional coaching, where staff feel and coaches and teachers feel supported with the support that we give from the central team, whilst also empowered to do what's right for their individual schools. So we'll start here by talking a little bit about how we attempt to adopt this high alignment, high autonomous approach with our schools. So to start with, I'll talk about the active ingredients. So when we talk about active ingredients, they're the elements of instructional coaching for us that we say we must implement in all of our schools if that instructional coaching is to be effective. So all of our schools must make sure in whatever program they implement or whatever approach they take that it's got these elements. So a bite-sized area for improvement, a clear model of better, what better looks like. And this is great where we can bring in examples of utilising Iris there, using some clips of our own teachers in our own schools, demonstrating what great looks like in whatever strategy we're focusing on. We make sure that all our approaches build in use of deliberate practice. So making sure teachers can practice beforehand, before going live in the classroom, and that building up that opportunity for practicing that standardised routine. So we make sure all schools know that that's a core. These are core elements that must be included in their instructional coaching plans. We also make sure that all our schools follow this particular coaching cycle. So there's a drop-in of around 10 to 15 minutes from a coach into the person that they're coaching, that teacher's lesson. And that's then followed up within the same week, and ideally as soon as possible, with a coaching conversation where the coach gives feedback. They agree on an action step together, and that, like I said, they're building that deliberate practice all within that coaching meeting, all taking space ideally within the shortest time frame possible, so within a week. That's then followed up by that teacher attempting to embed whatever action step was agreed in the coaching conversation into a lesson. And ideally that should span, there should be a week between each of these, no more than a week between each of these steps. And then that's closing that loop on what's happening with the approach there. So we say that all our schools should follow these steps within the coaching cycle and should attempt to keep that time frame as tight as possible. We also suggest that all our schools follow Paul Bambrick-Santayo's model, 6-step model for coaching conversations. So we've got the 6 steps that are identified here. It can be summarised as see it, name it, do it. So we say that this is the structure that all coaching conversations should effectively take and follow. So we're talking a lot about, in the past 3 slides that I've just gone through, that high alignment element, the core parts or core elements that all schools need to adopt in terms of their approach. And then we start to move into, okay, so where's the autonomy here? So when we're identifying suitable coaches across our schools, yes, we look for all of these things. So we make sure the leaders of teaching and learning, or the leaders of instructional coaching know that we have to have teachers with a track record of exceptional student outcomes, really strong teachers, strong repertoire of pedagogical knowledge, and equally as important as both of those things are, that those teachers have really great interpersonal skills and are able to develop those strong relationships of trust with whoever they're coaching. So we say yes, that's an approach that we should all take across our schools, but each individual school goes about selecting those coaches in their own way, in terms of, for example, how many coaches they're going to have. So some of our bigger schools might have quite large teams of coaching, perhaps one or two coaches in each faculty. And in some of our smaller primary schools, for example, it might be that they only have the capacity to work with their ECTs. So we don't try and enforce the fact that every person must be coached across the school, or every person at the same time must be coached across the school, or we don't say how many coaches need to be used. So each of our schools really adopt different types of models to how they go about selecting their coaches, and how they build in that time for coaching to happen as well. So some of our schools, for example, will have coaching at a certain time every week. So it might be every Wednesday afternoon coaching conversations happen. It might be that some of our schools have dedicated periods where on their timetable that are allocated to coaches for those coaching conversations to happen. But essentially, all of the schools have different times and different models for when that coaching happens. And in fact, just this morning, I've been working with one of our new head teachers of one of our new free schools that's going to be opening in September. And there we're looking at how they're going to build in a part of instructional coaching, so the deliberate practice element, with all of their staff pretty much every morning. When students are doing their retrieval practice, all the rest of the staff are going to go and work on the deliberate practice. So lots of different models are adopted there. And the same goes for the training and development part of how we train and develop our coaches. So we have a central offer of training for all coaches at the start of each academic year, where we do 3 sessions: an introduction to instructional coaching and exploring the basics and the evidence base behind it. We then do a session on highest leverage action steps, and then one on deliberate practice. This year, in fact, we're doing that slightly differently, where we're combining that into a whole day's training, where myself and some of the key members of staff across the central team, and some school staff that are really expert in instructional coaching, help to deliver a central offer to all our coaches. But then what happens is we work individually with the leads in the schools to develop through the year some bespoke coaches workshops, and we develop those based on what each individual school needs. So, for example, just over the last year, we've worked with some of our schools on, for example, how we might increase complexity when doing deliberate practice. We've worked with others specifically about how we might script coaching conversations. So it's all very different depending based on the needs of that school. Our central training offer, as well as those workshops that we deliver collaboratively with school leaders, are also supplemented in a number of our schools by some further school-led training that takes place. And again, that really helps to make sure that the individual challenges faced by that school, or individual challenges faced by the coaches in those schools, are addressed within that training. So, for example, one of our larger secondary schools really wanted to go above and beyond what we're offering centrally, and I'll come on to talk to you about how they adopt a waterfall model of coaching. In just a moment, I'll speak about that in a bit more depth. In regards to the resources that we offer our schools as well, so we've collectively across all of our schools come together to create our coaches handbook with key guidance in there. So all the schools have access to that document. However, some of the schools have decided to adapt and amend that to make it more contextual for themselves, and add in elements that they feel are necessary, that they need, and that's fine. We also offer all of our schools, all the teachers, not just coaches, all the teachers have got access to the Tom Sherrington and Oliver Cavigloli teaching walkthroughs on their iPads. So we've got electronic versions of those for all our teachers that they can help to use them when they're having their coaching conversations. We also suggest lots of other resources that might be beneficial and useful to them. So there are a range of books that we've got here, and schools really take a hybrid of the approaches that are discussed in these books. We have a Google Classroom as well, where we share various blogs for all of our schools, and the leaders in those schools can really pick and choose what they want to work more with their coaches on, and which resources they like to utilise the most. So again, thinking about that, making sure that we're having those high levels of autonomy there in the schools. Like I said, lots of different models are utilised. Particularly here, I've got an example of one of our schools, our large secondary school. And I said that their coaching, how they train their coaches, they employ this waterfall model. And what that means is they make sure that any coach is first coached by somebody else before that they can go and coach others. And what that really does is making sure that only the very best and the experienced coaches are able to go and coach others across the school. We've got other examples here of where schools will implement trying to build a culture of deliberate practice across the school, and they do that in different ways. So we've got one school that does that by integrating deliberate practice into all of their faculty meetings each week. We've got another one of our primary schools that do whole school deliberate practice every half term. They all come together as part of CPD sessions and build that into their whole school approach to CPD. And like I said, just this morning, we've been planning for our new free school, how we're going to really build a culture of deliberate practice by doing that pretty much every morning with all the teachers across the school. So that's really helping to support the whole approach to instructional coaching. And I will finish off by talking what's very critical to us is this, which hopefully you've seen through what I've spoken about, is about this whole collaboration approach that we have between the central team and central staff and our school leaders and school coaches. So we have these teaching and learning summits once every term where we all come together to collaborate on how we lead instructional coaching, and we have the opportunity to share best practice amongst our schools, what's working and what isn't. We also are really keen to collaborate on resource development. So like I mentioned, that coach's handbook, that's come together through collaboration through our leaders across the trust, but also really working and utilising Iris and utilising the tool that we've got there to build up banks of clips that we can use to help support our instructional coaching, particularly that element of where we're modelling what good looks like. And so next year, we're going to build on that even further with the introduction of the instructional palette that's available with Iris as well. And then finally, the last point on there I've got about how our teaching and learning strategic lead works very much on the ground in schools, working as a coach with teachers and helping to support each individual school's approach to instructional coaching on the ground, as well as just from afar at the central team. And that is the end of my presentation. So if there are any questions,
that's great. Thank you so much, Leyla. Yeah, I mean, what I find so kind of interesting, I think about Windsor Academy Trust in particular, and the way that you developed your coaching program, is really how you're not about a one size fits all approach. It's very much bespoke to teachers' needs. You know, you stressed about meeting teachers where they are, and I think that's very empowering rather than a very directive model of you must do this at this time. You know, that's what I find so fantastic about what is going on at Windsor Academy Trust. I mean, we've had a few questions come in, two that I've picked out, which I think are really relevant, and I'd like to know the answer to as well. The first one is, and it's really related to this one size fits all approach. How might you adapt your coaching, or how do you adapt your coaching for more experienced teachers as well? Because the books that you had on there, the approach that you're talking about, I think it's very obvious, I think, how that fits for novice teachers, but how do you go about adapting that for more experienced?
And I suppose that is the approach that we take to training our coaches in the first
Yes.
instance. And it's very much in that first session that we deliver about what is instructional coaching. And when we talk about the evidence base behind it, we talk very much about the spectrum that coaching can fall on, how it can be very directive where it's needed, where perhaps you're working with ECTs, to far more open-ended type approach. And what we say is the ideal is somewhere in the middle. You want a
Yes.
dialogical approach either way, where it's a two-way process where you're engaging with the person that you're coaching with. Um, but I suppose it is about making
Mhm.
sure that one, that you're selecting the right coaches as well, that they've got that expert knowledge, that they can work with the really good teachers to push them on even further,
Yes.
and utilizing things, the resources like Iris and those banks of good clips where we've got excellent teaching that we can really showcase and help work with teachers that are already really good, but that we're just trying to push them that little bit further.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, the second question is much briefer and it does link to what you've just said, which is about what role do the video clips that you film with Iris Connect play in the coaching? What do you use them for?
So what we're trying to use them more for as well, and what some of our coaches are using for is that model of better, that clear
Yes.
model of better. So it's all very well for example, using some of the books we use, like the teaching walkthroughs, to demonstrate how you would break down a strategy. We also say that a coach should always be willing to model themselves to who they're working with, what that looks like. But it's so powerful to be able to show a clip of someone from your own school
Yes.
demonstrating a strategy done really well.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And thank you so much again, Layla. It was a pleasure to see you again and to hear you speak about the brilliant work that's going on at Windsor Academy Trust. So thank you so much, and I hope we can
Thank
catch
you,
up soon.
Haile.
Thank you.
Thanks.